Hello, Dre. Welcome on the Grandson Journey podcast. How are you?
Hey, Clara, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on. I'm excited for this conversation.
Yes. Are you in Miami? Is that correct? Florida?
Yes.
Oh, very cool. And maybe just a quick intro for everyone who's listening. Dre Baldwin, aka Dre All Day. I actually love that, by the way. Also known as Work on Your Game. Dre specializes in helping entrepreneurs and athletes dominate their game from the inside out. You're the CEO and founder of Work on Your Game. You've given 4 TEDx talks and has authored 33 books, which is impressive. I know, dive into that as well, just the amount of content you're able to create and produce. And you've had 9-year personal basketball career playing in 8 different countries. And your framework is the roadmap in reverse for professional mindset, strategy, systems, and accountability. So that's my quick intro. And I want to dive into so many things with you, Jay, including your basketball journey, the passion you've had, and how you're transferring the mindset into now your own business and helping entrepreneurs and corporate leaders adopt this athletic mindset to achieve the next level of growth. But before we dive into all of that, I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself. Anything else you want to add?
Well, hopefully I can live up to that bio. Hope I'm that good. But as far as that, no, nothing that needs to be added. I think you pretty much summarized it there, but I think we'll get to the rest of it through this conversation.
Yes. Excellent. And maybe just to dive right in, I'm always curious about my guests' upbringing, because I have guests from all different backgrounds, playing all different sports and growing up in different countries and states. So I'm curious if you could take us back a little bit to your upbringing of what it was like to grow up. I believe you were from Philly. And yes. What helped you uncover your first passion, especially in basketball? I know you played many different sports when you were a kid, but basketball seemed to be really the thing that you were passionate about the most. And so I'm curious to hear a bit about that.
Sure. So this is where I would have started anyway, had I added anything. So I think it's perfect. So I come from the city of Philadelphia. That is correct. I'm now based in Miami, Florida, but played sports all through youth. So I was always into sports. I think I had an athletic gene, and I was pretty tall. So I was into trying to play a sport. So I played, of course, the normal backyard. And where I'm from was a driveway because there wasn't no grass. So it was concrete. But driveway sports, kickball, two-hand touch football. If someone had a portable basketball court that they could pull out of the garage, we would play that. And things like that. And as I got older, and my parents wanted me to get into maybe team sports, I tried a little bit of American football, but I never even got around to the part where you put the equipment on. So I never really played football. And then baseball, and wasn't really that good at baseball. I was kind of mediocre at best. My dad was into coaching baseball, so he actually coached a youth team that I was on. Still coaches youth to this day, years and years later, still coaches youth. But I wasn't really that good at baseball. My ceiling was I probably would have been a bench player at high school if I played baseball, so I wasn't good. Then finally got to basketball around age 14. So at first I didn't have a passion for basketball. It's not like I just said, oh, I'm passionate about basketball, and all of a sudden I started playing. It wasn't like that. It was, Clara, that I just wanted to play a sport, period. And I had tried all the other sports that I saw were available to me. And basketball was the one that, where I come from, every young man plays basketball because the good thing is you need no equipment and you only need one ball and everybody can play. So I just started going to the basketball courts. And again, since I was pretty tall, it was expected, again, where I'm from, that you should be good at basketball because you're tall. That's just how it is in our community. At least it was then. I don't know how it is now. And it wasn't good at first. I mean, I started playing at 14, but didn't make my high school team until I was a senior. But I would just go to the park by myself and just practice, just one ball, me in the court, and just practice doing things that I saw other people doing. People who were a lot better than me, was pretty much everybody in the neighborhood, even the girls. And slowly over time, I just started to develop and I started to get better, even though I didn't have any tangible results. I didn't really have any tangible results in basketball till I was maybe 17 years of age. And that was in my junior year. And I wasn't even on my high school team. This was playing on a local recreational team, not even the school. I didn't play on my school team until I was a senior. And that year, I like to tell people, Clara, I had the best seats in the house, front row, right on the bench, watching the games from the bench because I wasn't playing. I sat on the bench my senior year in high school. And then getting out of high school, I wanted to continue playing, but of course, nobody was checking for me to play. So I'll stop there and see where you want to take the conversation.
Well, thank you for the description. There are several things that stood out to me, including it seems like you actually picked up basketball quite late, because I envision many people start earlier on. A similar thing actually was with me in tennis, like if I look back in my tennis career. But going back to that beginning, I think starting later, at least it was for me, I don't know if it was for you, I've always had this thing in my mind that I'm behind everybody else because I missed on, let's say, starting in even 6, 7. Now kids actually maybe start too early, specializing like 3, 4, 5 years old, and you start developing the feel for the ball and the racket. I'm sure there's other things in basketball, but looking back at it, have you had sort of the same feeling that you're behind everybody else and that's why you gotta work harder? And how did that relate or not relate to your confidence?
Good question. So when I first started playing basketball, I knew that I was behind. So I didn't feel like I was behind. I was behind because I could see the other players in my age bracket, even some players who were younger than me or peers who were younger than me in the neighborhood. They were just better at basketball because they had more experience and they had been playing for longer. So I knew logically that I was behind them. So my thing was, and the thing is, it's interesting the way that you explain it and the way I'm explaining it, just to juxtapose, because females tend to aim towards their feelings. They talk about how they feel, whereas males, we tend to look at things logically, what we think. And yes, you felt like you were behind and you used that. Sounds like you use it to kind of drive you to do more work, which then led to you being more disciplined and led to more confidence. Whereas for me, we ended up in the same place, but for different reasons. I knew that I was behind because I just started playing and I could see everyone was better than me. So for me, it was the logical breakdown of it was, Clara, okay, how do I catch up to these other players? Because all of us come to the park in the evenings and just play with each other. And I reasoned that if I only came to the park and played with all these other players, then we're all pretty much going to advance at the same pace. Again, this is just the way that at 14, 15 years of age, that's what made the most sense to me. So I figured that I needed to do something that they were not doing. Now in Philadelphia in the summer times, it gets really hot. So around 10, 11, 12 o'clock, it's too hot for anybody to be outside on the asphalt concrete, or too hot, relatively speaking, for them. So I realized, okay, why don't I just go out there and practice during those hours when nobody else is out there? So that way, number one, I can get the court to myself and I can actually practice. I'm not playing, but practicing. And there's a difference, right? So let me take this time to practice so I can get better. And then I'll go home, have a little snack and sit in air conditioning. Then I'll come back to the park in the evening when everybody else is out there. And then slowly over time, hopefully, this is, again, my teenager logic, hopefully over time, I will slowly catch up to those other players. So then we can be even. And then if that works, then maybe I can keep practicing and I'll get better than them. So that was my process. So that was the logic that led to the discipline of practicing all the time. And that discipline created the confidence because over time, I started to get better. As I told you, I started playing at 14. I didn't really have any tangible result that I could point to and say, hey, I did this until I was about 17. But over those years, I could feel myself improving, even though I could not tangibly prove that I was improving. And then by 17, I could actually show you, hey, I had this many points in a recreational game last week, or hey, at least I made the high school team, right? And I'm sitting the bench, but at least I'm on the team. And then when I got to college, I was actually playing. So the confidence really started to build around the ages 17, 18, 19, through my freshman year of college, because I now started to have some tangible results. And the confidence came from not only me tangibly knowing that I was doing something, but also I knew that everybody else could see that I was actually doing something. So now the effort that I was putting in, not only was it paying off for me looking at myself in the mirror, but also I knew that they could see the results were coming. So that's where the confidence started to build.
And you described something really interesting that I also personally resonate. It seems like you weren't great at basketball early on, or actually wasn't the sport you were best at growing up, which I would argue the same for tennis. I had perhaps kind of raw physical strength and skills just because of my biology that we don't choose for ourselves. You mentioned you were tall. I'm tall as well, which in tennis, it and it can be advantage, and kind of it's very physical sport, so you need a lot of stamina to move around and continue to run on the court for 2 to 3 hours, especially long matches. But I find that many kids, especially in that forming age, when you're going through the 14, 15, 16, 17 progression, if you're not great at something, they typically give up. So there must have been some sort of passion you were discovering for the sport that allowed you to go through those hard years where you were nowhere close to best, but you were so disciplined and committed. This game is really interesting. I want to continue putting the hard work and effort to get better. How would you reflect on that? What grabbed you about the sport the most that made you put in the effort and the work to continuously improve?
The competition. So I wasn't good. You're correct. I thought my best sport was probably either football or baseball, because those are the two sports that I would play, baseball only because I was athletic. So I had the speed, I could like run and jump. But the thing about baseball is in order to run and jump, you got to actually hit the ball. I wasn't that good at that. So that's why I didn't do much in baseball. Football, I thought I may have had a chance in football. But again, I never got around to actually playing. And the thing about football, yes, you can run and jump, but you also got to hit and or get hit. And I don't know if my body was built for that. Probably wasn't. So good thing I didn't play football. I think I might have been, it's funny that you're a tennis player. I might have been a good tennis player, but where I come from, Clara, nobody plays tennis. So there was the playground that I grew up playing at, there was a basketball court. There were two basketball courts, and right next to the basketball court is the tennis court. And we had these beautiful tennis courts in my neighborhood. It was like 4 tennis courts, well kept. Nobody messed with them. Nobody bothered them. Every once in a while, you would see some older people out there, maybe a husband and wife hitting the ball back and forth. And nobody else ever played on the tennis courts, ever. The only time we stepped on the tennis court is if somehow the basketball went over the fence and got on the tennis court and you had to go over there and get it. But other than that, nobody ever stepped on the tennis court. But I think I could have been a really good tennis player because, like you just said, you need stamina, you need agility, you need quickness, and it's a solo sport. And I tend to have the mindset of a solo sport player, as a matter of fact, even though, so it's ironic that I played a team sport like basketball, because I'm much more of an individualist than a team guy. But anyway, to answer your question here, as far as developing over time, I was competing, of course, against the other kids in the neighborhood because I wanted to catch up to them. And again, the boys, we ridicule each other. Hey, you're not good. You're practicing all the time. You're not even on your high school team. You played in the game the other day. You didn't even score. We playing pickup basketball on the playground. You didn't get chosen to even be on the team. So we ridicule each other. So I would compete against that because I didn't want that to be the truth. And really, I was competing against the situation. I wasn't really competing against any one person. There was a bunch of people. They were all better than me. So I could say I was competing against the whole neighborhood, but really I was competing against the situation of how do I overcome this? Because I've always been a competitive individual, and sports was my outlet for that competition. So I'm thankful that my parents introduced me to sports, even though my parents were not athletes at all. I'm 6 feet 4 inches tall, 193 centimeters for those in the metric system. My dad is like 5'8". My mom's like 5'7". They're not tall at all. They never played basketball. They had no basketball talent whatsoever. Again, I had the athletic genetics, but I didn't have nobody was training me. Nobody was teaching me. Nobody took me under their wings. And again, I grew up in the 90s, so there's no social media. It's not like I could go to the internet and get information from anybody. So I really was just self-taught, and I was just competing against the circumstance. And as I saw myself getting better, I knew that I could out-discipline everybody. I was not out-talenting them, and I hadn't outperformed them, at least not yet. But I could continue to show up to the park every day because I would see, because I would go by the park sometimes in the afternoon. I would see it was empty. Why is nobody out there? It was beautiful, but it was too hot. So I said, that's my opportunity. So I took advantage of that opportunity to slowly catch up. Eventually, by, again, around age 18, I caught up. And then from college years on, I completely surpassed them because a lot of them, you mentioned this a moment ago, when you're not getting the success, most people quit pretty easily and often pretty early. So by the time we all around age 14, 15, we're all going to high school, everyone in my age bracket. And everybody goes and tries out for the high school basketball team, not because they're passionate about basketball. That's not the reason they try out. People try out because it's available. Now, it's there. So, okay, it's like the basketball court's there at the playground. Everybody hangs at the playground. everybody's playing basketball, so I might as well play basketball. That's kind of how it works where I'm from. That's the default. You just play because it's there. If everybody had been playing tennis, Clara, we'd be having a conversation about tennis right now. But since everybody played basketball, I'll play basketball. So that's how it goes. So then everybody tries out at their high schools for the team. And if you don't make it your freshman year, a lot of people just pretty much drop off. About 60% of them drop off. They don't try to take basketball serious anymore. They might play in the playground, but they don't take it serious. Sophomore year, you get another percentage of people drop off, because what happens is I find that a lot of people just didn't want to deal with the embarrassment of knowing that everybody else knew that you tried twice and didn't make it. So my junior and senior year, it would just be every year there'd be fewer people trying out for the basketball team. My senior year was hardly anybody at tryouts, at least from my grade. I mean, the ninth grade, the younger guys, they tried out. But my senior year, my senior classmates, very few of us tried out for the basketball team our senior year if we weren't already on the basketball team. So me, I just was immune to that feeling of embarrassment. Oh, you keep trying, but you haven't made it. It didn't bother me, because I could feel internally, as I said, that I was getting better, even though I had no tangible proof that I was getting better. So that was always what it was for me. So to answer your question here, tying this up, is competing again against the field. I was competing against everybody, and I was competing against the circumstance of, I know that this can work out, because I could feel slowly that the improvements were coming.
Mm. And I love what you're mentioning, especially in those teenage years. I think it's really hard to focus on improving and measuring improvements mostly against yourself, because that's what I'm kind of hearing you say. You've seen in big scheme of things, you were still underperforming in comparison to the team, of like trying to make the team. You didn't make it until your senior year, but you didn't give up because you felt that the effort you were putting in on a daily basis is actually making you better at the sport. And so you measured yourself against that. I think that's so important in life, to not lose track of where am I in the big scheme of things, but as far as you're seeing that the effort that you're putting in makes sense for you and is creating the progress that at least you see your own improvements. I will compare it even just now. Obviously, I work out. I know you work out too religiously as well. But a lot of people, especially in the middle-age years, who haven't been an athletes before, realizing, well, I better start working out because I'm aging. It's not going to get better. I need to start doing something in order to be able to get up from a couch when I'm 70 or walk around, right? Because that's way more difficult. And I find often they come over, for example, I invite people to work out with me, and they start to comparing themselves to me, who's had like a 15 years of tennis career where I've played like 4 to 6 hours a day, and then worked out religiously through different sports for almost another 10, 15 years. And then they come and they're embarrassed they can't do the same things that I can. And I was like, look, I have like a very different background. You can't compare yourself to me. You just compare yourself to the discipline and come and putting the effort. So I've had many people like come in, show up once or twice, and they're, oh, this is like way too hard. I'm not coming anymore. And I think that translates to many other areas of life. Mm-hmm. So just to pause, anything you want to add on that, Dre, as you now coach many different people in many different fields and speak about sort of this level of mindset. And I've heard you talk about the third day as well. I don't know if that sort of relates to this conversation and point.
Well, yeah, the third day does relate. I mean, third day relates to everything, because the third day is all about showing up and giving your best effort when you least feel like it, which of course every professional has to deal with. And especially when you're playing a sport, because when you're playing a sport and you're taking it serious, Clara, you know very well, there are days that you don't feel like doing the training, but when you're taking the sport serious, you have to train every day. So there are days you don't feel like training. There are days you don't feel like doing the stuff that goes around the training. So I don't know exactly what it is in tennis, but in basketball, we have a lot of stuff we do that's not actually on the court, but you have to do it because you're playing the sport. So in basketball, you might have conditioning workouts where you have to go and run a couple miles, or you have to go to the weight room. You have to lift some weights, or you might need to do some hop in the ice tub, or something that is not actually on the court, which we usually found fun. But it is related to it and is one of the requirements if you're going to be on the team or if you're going to be a serious player. So the third day is all about the moments when those things happen, and the decision that you make in that moment is really about the decision, not the moment itself, because the decision is a choice. You can't always choose the circumstance because you have a coach and there's a team and here are the requirements of the team. You don't choose that, but you do choose your decision on if you're going to show up all the way during that training session. You're going to show up and give your best effort in that workout that you didn't even have to do, but you have a trainer and your trainer says we have a workout right now. So that's what the third day is about. And that third day is really about that highest level of discipline. And as I said earlier, discipline creates confidence. The more disciplined you are at the thing that you do, the more confident you will be. And that's where the performance comes from. And discipline is a byproduct of structure. So all of these pieces work together. So when you're on a team or you're playing a sport, even a solo sport, and you're serious about it, usually that means you have some type of trainer or a coach. They create the structure, you plug into the structure, then you become disciplined. You're so disciplined at doing the training, now your confidence goes up. And then when you're so confident, then you get in the match and you perform. So it all works together. So the third day is a piece in the puzzle, but it's a big piece.
I do want to go back also again to your example and everything I've read about you, that you pretty much self-taught yourself how to play basketball. And sorry, yep. I don't know exactly how old you are, but reflecting on my childhood, which maybe was still slightly different. I always joke Czech Republic, because of the communist era, it got shifted, the development of the country back. So actually when I was growing up playing tennis, there was nothing like the social media. You couldn't find obviously all of the science of performance and recovery. I wish I had access to all of this information that's available now. That would make me certainly a better player. So reflecting back on that 13, 14, 15 years old, how did you self-taught yourself? Because I'm guessing not much of this information was available as well. So how did you know what to do, how to practice? Did you observe others, or were there other aspects that kind of made you decide this is what I'm going to do to outperform the other people on the team?
Well, I'm 42 years of age as of this recording. So anyone want to backdate that? That means in that age period, we're talking the mid 90s. So there was TV and there were magazines and there were books, but there was no, I mean, the internet existed, but it was nothing like what we have now. And it wasn't, there weren't people putting information on the internet about, hey, here's how you do this and this. That didn't start till around the turn of the century, around 2000 moving on. That's when you got bloggers and all of that stuff. And I jumped into that pretty soon. So for me, when it came to basketball, I was 100% self-taught. And it was just my ability to look at another person doing something. And even though I couldn't perfectly do it, of course, just by watching them, I could see what they did. And then the next day I could come to the park by myself when there was nobody watching and no one waiting for me to do it right. I could just practice on my own. So the good thing about being able to practice by yourself is that you can make mistakes. You can try things, you can mess up, and there's nobody watching you. There's nobody waiting on you. There's no clock. And you can just basically use it as a sandbox, kind of, so to speak, to just practice. And that's all I did. And I realized pretty quickly there were a few things that I needed to master. I knew the most important things I needed to master was, number one, I needed to be able to make a layup with both hands. So with the right hand and with the left hand, make a layup. And then I needed to be able to dribble the basketball. Those are the two things I knew I needed to master. And that's what I practiced. I spent a lot of time just practicing dribbling and making a layup. And then since I was tall, and a lot of people would say, well, you're that tall, you should be able to dunk. Then I started trying to work on how to dunk the basketball. So those are really the first three skills I tried to master. And then, of course, you get the shooting, and then you start combining all this stuff, dribbling into a layup, dribbling into a dunk, dribbling into a shot. And actually, basketball is not that complicated of a sport. There's only a few things you can do. It's just the combinations of putting them together is what makes it look more fancy than it actually is. But as I got older and I was able to articulate and explain this stuff, I started, I'm sure we'll get to this, I started explaining it to other players once I understood the game. So the biggest thing for me was just having that empty space where nobody cared if you messed up. Nobody actually knew that I was even doing it because nobody was paying attention. I got to use that as my breeding ground for my development in my game. And it was just the willingness to show up consistently, my ability to just look at somebody on Tuesday night, do something and say, that's interesting what he just did. I can't do that. Then Wednesday, I would come to the park in the afternoon by myself, and I would try to practice doing what I could remember of that guy doing. That's pretty much how I developed my game.
I love that observation that you've had, and just, I guess, again, going back to discipline and willingness to put in the work and try things out. I do want to touch base also what you mentioned earlier, the solo player, that you were more of a solo player, because this is interesting. I interview guests from different sports. Obviously, being a tennis player is very individual sport. You have some team aspect in doubles, which I actually always enjoyed if you have a partner, but usually you pick a partner that you match with, and then you're perfecting the game and strategy as much you can to play tournaments together, because then you sort of recognize strength and can balance each other out. I'm curious about your aspect of what you consider to be more of individualistic type of person and how you fit into the team sport, because I'm always trying to kind of compare, even through my guests, why did you choose team sport versus why did you choose individual sport? And that can be always complicated, balancing the teamwork. So anything you want to share on that, Dre?
Sure. There's a lot I can share on that. Are you familiar with the Big Five personality traits, Clara? Ever heard of it?
Yes. Yeah, I have.
Okay.
But you can describe it in high level for anybody who hasn't.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, I'm going to. So I don't even remember what all five are, but I know one is conscientiousness, one is neuroticism, and one is disagreeableness or agreeableness. So that's the one that I want to focus on. So the part about being disagreeable or agreeable, and the thing about the Big Five personality traits for people who are not familiar with the concept, and you can Google it, it's easy to find. It lays out 5 traits that everyone has some level of in life, and some people are high on a trait and some people are low on a trait, but it's not about good or bad. It's not a measure of good or bad where you are on the scale. It's just a measure of who you are as a person, because every personality is unique. So one of those 5 traits is agreeableness. Agreeableness are people who are high on agreeableness tend to be very compromising people. They're the type of people who want to get along with everybody. They like to go along to get along. They may be more compromising. They just want to make sure everyone's together. They're the type of people who don't like to be by themselves. They like to be part of groups. They're very team and group oriented type of individuals. Whereas those who are low on the agreeableness scale, these are the type of people who are much more willing to voice disagreement with other people. They're the type of people who like to do things by themselves. They are the type of people who don't mind being by themselves and doing things on their own. And from the people who are high in disagreeableness, this is where you find a lot of entrepreneurs. You find a lot of solo athletes. You find a lot of people who just do things their own way. Doesn't mean that they don't like people. Doesn't mean they can't get along with people, but they have a much more independent streak. Let's just put it that way. I am extremely high on the disagreeableness of the Big Five personality traits. I'm not a very highly agreeable person. And again, that doesn't mean you're a negative person. Doesn't mean you're a bad person. I have a lot of friends. I can make connections. I can talk to people. We're talking right here, right? So I have the ability to be agreeable, friendly, personable, life of the party. I'm not an introvert. I like to be around people, but I am high on disagreeableness, being that what that means is if I'm in a room full of people and someone offers an opinion and I disagree, the person who's high in agreeableness won't say that they disagree. Person who's high in disagreeableness will say right in front of everybody, I don't agree with that. And they'll tell you why they don't agree. And they don't mind if nobody else agrees with them. That's a disagreeable. I'm that type of person. And from that space, you usually find people who do things that are more individualistic. So this is why I said I probably would have been a great tennis player or boxer or runner or something like some sport that is just you by yourself, as opposed to a team sport, because in a team sport, everybody has to do everything together. Yeah. So even when I started playing on teams, let's say I made the high school team, and then in college when I was actually playing and I was on the team, I never wanted to limit myself to only doing, Clara, what the team was doing. Because even then I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, if we're all on the team together all season and we all have practice this many days per week, how am I going to become better than the rest of my teammates? Because we're all doing the same stuff. I need to advance faster than they're advancing. I had to do more than they're doing. So if we had practice 1 hour a day, 6 days a week, that's 6 hours a week of practice. I got to do like 9 or 10 hours of practice. So I need to find 4 hours where I can practice when everybody else is not practicing so that my progress is faster than theirs. That's a disagreeable thought. Just to even think that. Because a lot of my teammates, and I played with a lot of players, and from high school to college to the pros, most pro players, and I don't know if this is the case for you in tennis, I would love to hear it, but most of the pro players who I dealt with, even at the pro level, college level, they don't really practice. They didn't really work on their games that much outside of what was required of them. I always wanted to do more than what was required because I knew I wanted to go further. I wanted to do it faster, and I wanted to be better than even the people who I was teammates with. I wanted to make sure I was better than them. Forget the opponent. I want to be better than my teammates. So I always had that mindset, and it lent itself perfectly to me becoming an entrepreneur, because entrepreneurs are usually high in disagreeableness because, I mean, if you just think about what an entrepreneur is, Clara, we are people who looked at the landscape of what's going on in the world professionally, and we said, I can do it better. I can do it differently than how it's being done now, and it's better than what's being done now. Because if you were high in agreeableness, you would just go fit in somewhere. Whereas entrepreneur says, I'm not going to fit in. I'm going to go do my thing, and I'm going to make everyone else fit in with me. It's just a different mentality. So as I gotten older and I got into entrepreneurship and I started to understand these things, that's when I said, man, I missed out by not being a tennis player or a boxer, because I probably could have been really good at it because I wouldn't need to get along with teammates. I could have just did my thing the way that I wanted to do it. And the other thing I was going to say here was, when it came to playing sports, again, as I told you, my parents were not athletes and they were not trying to raise an athlete. Their thing with me was they just wanted me to, and I have a sister who's a year older than me, they just wanted us to go to school, get good grades, go to college, graduate, because my parents had not graduated from college, at least when we were born, they had not. And they wanted us to at least do that at a level higher than what they did, which is what a parent is supposed to do, right? They want their kids to do a little bit better than them, at least to the best of their knowledge. They didn't know anything about sports, so they weren't pushing me to sports. They were just like, okay, we didn't graduate college, so you two are going to do that. So that hopefully theoretically sets you up to be more successful than we were, my parents' mindset. And they didn't say that, but I'm assuming this is the way that they were thinking. And when I got into basketball, it was fine for them because, okay, he's doing something productive. He's not hanging in the streets. He's doing something productive, and it didn't cost him any money. See, the reason why I didn't play football, American football, is because football equipment costs money. And my parents would always try to balance it out between my sister and I. Like, if we had to spend money on you doing this activity, we got to spend money on your sister doing this activity. Well, there's no female activity that has the financial equivalent to football, at least not that my parents knew about. And that's why I never really played football. Like, they knew I wanted to play, but they're like, hey, we can't afford this equipment, so how about you play baseball? That's literally what they said to me. We can't afford the equipment for you to play football, so how about you play baseball instead? So that is how my football career ended. I didn't tell you that, but that's how it happened. Mm-hmm. Now, had they known about, let's say, a solo sport, and I know you know this a lot better than I do, but from what I understand, because I live down here in Miami, so tennis is huge down here. Yes. Tennis is an expensive sport. It's not cheap to play tennis. It's like golf, right? It's not cheap to play these sports. So had I decided to play something like tennis, eventually my parents would have seen the bill for a trainer or to go to some camp or to go to, had I shown any promise, whoever the tennis person was, where they went to my parents and said, well, look, this boy has an opportunity to do this and this and this, so we want to send him to this, and here's how much it costs. And they would have said, okay, that's the end of tennis. So that would have been the end of my tennis career. So the thing about basketball, and again, coming from the environment that I come from in the inner city, everybody can play basketball and it doesn't cost anything. You just go to the park and you just play. So it kind of lent itself not only to who I was as far as my physical genetics, but also to my situation. So had I been exposed to other things, as I said, we'd be having a conversation about a different sport right now, but that was just my circumstance.
And in many ways, what you're mentioning, I love the low barrier to entry in some ways in basketball and the team sports is definitely one of the things that's being talked about in tennis. Obviously, how do you diversify and bring more of the talent, even just some of the underprivileged environments, because it's so expensive. And it's expensive earlier on, but it becomes even more expensive as you need to get better and need to travel around the world for tournaments. And then the better you get, then you want to travel with a coach, because if the coach is there, you can practice with the coach and they can sort of observe and see what you're doing, good or bad, and you can fit in more practice within the tournaments as you kind of play your year out. So I agree. I do want to touch base going back on the agreeableness, and I love that you brought it up. I actually use it very often. Obviously follow Jordan Peterson, that in many
Yes.
ways is the better rep now, but I still think some of the things he said are fantastic. So I've actually taken his 5-trait personality test. And openly, I also fall more in the disagreeableness. So he kind of categorizes them as masculine and feminine traits, more of not that you can be man and have more of a feminine side and be a female and have more of a masculine side. He sort of
Mm-hmm.
averages it out to where most men and women fall into. And I've
Mm-hmm.
actually used specifically the agreeableness a lot, even in our corporate world and for women overall, because on average, again, not every woman, actually not me specifically, I don't count into that group, but most women agree more often than most men would. And so I actually
Right.
think that agreeableness is important, especially when negotiating salaries or promotions, because even if you're just being hired, and we women tend to agree on average sooner than men, that will put us into like starting at a lower pay bracket category. And that goes with like everything, including climbing hierarchies in any sort of corporations.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I fall actually more on the average of where most men are. I have been in male dominated industry, and that can also create challenges when somebody doesn't expect women to be that disagreeable as I am. But I'm curious if you would be willing to share where on the disagreeableness level you are, Dre, because just to give one more hint, I live with a partner who's 1% disagreeable. So which means if you put 100 people in the room, 99% of them will agree sooner than he will, which is
Yeah.
always fun because we're always debating and discussing things. But are you open to sharing where you at, Dre?
Well, I've never officially measured it. I don't know if there's a measurement, but I'm probably close to your partner that you mentioned. So I am, again, I'm the type of person who is not even disagree in being negative. It's just that when I disagree, I'm willing to openly disagree in front of
Yeah.
a room full of people, in front of whoever this person is. They're expecting everybody else is saying yes, and I'm going to say no. And on top of the fact that I'm willing to defend my disagreeing. So I'm disagreeing, but I'll tell you why I disagree and I'll articulate it. And I even have people in my audiences, I'll put out some content and I'll say something. I'll talk about some topic that everyone's talking about and I'll offer a different type of approach to it. And someone will write me back and say, Dre, I don't even agree with what you said, but I appreciate how you said it and the way that you broke it down, the way you explain, the way you can back up your position. And that's one of my top skills is just being able to articulate the disagreement and just always being the type of person who, ever since I was in middle school, I can remember it this far back, I was always the type of person who my thinking always went against the grain. So the group, the crowd, the class would all be thinking one way and I'll be thinking another way. And again, I don't think I was the only one who thought differently. I don't think I'm just some genius who thinks differently from everybody else. I think a lot of people think, not a lot, let's say there are 30 people in the room. There may be 10 people in the room who don't agree with the consensus, but 9 of them won't say anything. They'll just go along to get along. Again, that's the agreeableness. Whereas I would actually say something like, no, I don't agree with that. And here's why. And I would explain it. And I didn't feel uncomfortable when the group will push back against me because I disagree with them. That's the difference, is the willingness to actually stand on the disagreement, not just disagree. Because even these days, when I say something that I know I'm going against the grain of what appears to be, quote unquote, everybody's opinion, there are people who will quietly agree with me. And this is what I tell people who are in a thought leadership space is that when people agree with you, they do so quietly and in private. But when people disagree with you, they do it loudly and in public. So it seems like when people disagree with you, it seems like it's everybody, but really it's about half and half. It's just the people who disagree don't do it loudly because they don't want to deal with that blowback. Whereas the people who disagree with you, especially if you're going against the grain, they think you're crazy because you're the quote unquote only one with this opinion. So they'll come at you and they'll make sure everybody sees it. But you just have to understand that. And because I understand it, it doesn't bother me to go against the grain, even especially because I know that what I'm saying, I can defend it. So that's the thing when it comes to disagreeableness with me.
I actually love disagreeable person or people overall. I think it makes for better ideas because I truly believe, especially when you're arguing anything, whether it can be in sports, what strategy you're going to play for this important point, or whether it's going to be a business opportunity that you're creating within corporations, there is a truth to group thing. So the more people that are thinking like you and agreeing, I think there's less opportunity you have to see the differences. And that's the beauty of having people come from different perspectives and having different backgrounds, because if you disagree and you voice it out loud, that makes people think, why are you disagreeing? How are you seeing this differently than me? And that allows, at the end, always for better outcomes and solutions, like having this debate and arguing between different points of view. So I actually think too much agreeableness is not good for innovation and productivity. And I hope more people will embrace sort of productive disagreeableness. And obviously you can debate and disagree. At some point somebody needs to make a decision, and then you commit and go with it, right? Once you kind of put everything out there and you present your best reasoning. But I really enjoyed that trait. Yeah.
Can I add something to that?
Please.
So have you read Jim Collins' book, Good to Great?
I've heard about it. I have to admit I haven't read it, but I've heard enough. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. You should read it. So one of the things in that book that Jim Collins talks about, because the book, for those not familiar with it, he and his team, they researched a bunch of publicly traded companies that had been successful over an extended period of time. And they had certain metrics of how they measure success. And when they found the most successful companies, what they did was break down what are the commonalities amongst the most successful organizations. And one of them was the concept of getting the wrong people out of the organization and getting the right people in. And when he's explaining it in the book about getting the right people in, he talks about how companies would find the best people, the best performing individuals, not even for a specific job, but just the highest level types of people. They would just find high level people, get them all together, and then they would figure out what they were going to do. They would get the quality of person first, then they would figure out the job second. And then when it came time to actually do the jobs, they would say, okay, here's the ideas of what we're going to do. What does everybody think about this? And because they were high level people, they did not all agree. They would not be any groupthink. They would disagree on what to do or how to do it or where to do it. They would disagree on all the details. And what Jim explained in the book, and he gave many examples of this, is that the high level workers in the companies, they would have these knockdown, drag out arguments over what to do, how to do it, when to do it, where to do it, why to do it. They would just argue and argue and argue, fight tooth and nail over who had the better idea or how we were going to do things. And then they would finally come to a consensus. And then all the people, they could put aside the fact that they disagreed and then all get aligned and then go do the job. And they would do it at a really high level. Those are what disagreeable people are able to do. What I find, I don't know if you have this experience, but especially using social media, and especially whenever I speak on hot button topics or whatever they may be, I don't do all the time, but I am willing to do, is that people tend to take the topics personally. They tend to take disagreement personally. And that's the biggest challenge with people who are more on the agreeable side, is that they take disagreement as if it's a personal attack on them. And I try to explain to people all the time, like, I'm not attacking you, I'm attacking your point. And there's a difference. I can love you, but I just hate your point. Your point sucks. You're a great person, but the point's no good. I'm just beating up the point. And a lot of people can't take that. I would say like 95% of the people who I see engaging, they take a disagreement as if I'm attacking them when I'm not. And I don't have that problem. Like, if I put out an idea and you think the idea is terrible, you can tell me. You can tell me right to my face that the idea is terrible, as long as you can tell me why it's terrible. Yeah. And if you can explain it to me, I will say, you know what, you're right. The idea is terrible. What's your idea? Let's go with yours. And if yours is better, then I'm on board with yours, and there's nothing personal. There's no residue from the fact that you disagree with my point. And this is why I value, as you said, the disagreeable people, because we can get in a room, 10 of us can have 10 different ideas. We're going to put all 10 ideas on the table. Each of us will have to defend our point, and everybody else gets to attack it. And in the end, the best idea is going to win. And the 10 people in the room will say, okay, 9 of them are going to say, okay, that wasn't my idea, but it is better than my idea. I'm behind that idea. And then you put the minds of those 10 people together, and that's an unstoppable team. But you got to find the right people who have the ability to separate their opinion from who they are as a person. They're not taking it as, this is my child because you're disagreeing with it. It's just an idea. Ideas are a dime a dozen. So none of my ideas need to quote unquote win. If my idea is terrible, I want to know. Tell me. I want to know now. All right, let's not waste time. Tell me now that it sucks so we can get something better, because the outcome, and I tell people this in my audiences all the time, that we're in a performance and results-based business. This is not an ego-based business. It's about the result. So whatever produces the result, let's do that. Just because it came from me does not mean it's going to win. It's whatever produces the result. That's what I'm behind, because that's the business that I'm in.
I love everything you said and agree with it. And I have seen it in practice in corporations that I have worked in. And I strongly believe that we ourselves are unable to see fully our own biases. And it's because we're just been grown up and gone through this experience. So obviously the way we think will come naturally, or we will feel that's sort of the right path to progress, but it takes somebody else to point out, look, maybe you haven't thought this through. This could be a good idea, but if you do this, then you can take it to a next level. So really that beautiful, productive disagreement is, I find, so helpful in obviously everything in life, business, as well as sports, right? I think that's why being an athlete, you kind of get to also take disagreeableness, because you're from early on, typically have coaches and sometimes teammates that are yelling at you very straightforwardly what you have done wrong. And so I find that athletes sometimes can take those disagreements and very transparent feedback, as far as if somebody can explain and it's true and they can reason through it why you should do this way or that way, perhaps a little bit better than some of the other people that perhaps haven't seen athletics. I know I'm making a big generalized statement, but what do you think, Dre? Because you have experience with coaching many athletes as well as entrepreneurs and corporate leaders. How do you look at that, the athletic versus non-athletic population?
Is a great experience to play sports for that reason alone, because Clara, you know as well as I do, most athletes don't even make it to play at the pro level. I mean, most don't make it to college level, let alone the pro level. And still, the experience of playing sports teaches us a lot of things. First of all, to respect authority, to respect the authority of a coach or someone who has a higher rank than you in an organization. Because when you go work in corporate, you go work in an organization, there are people above you, and you have to respect their authority. Even if you don't always agree with their position, you can disagree in a way, but at the same time, you need to be respectful of the position that they have with regards to the position that you have. Number two, being willing to take feedback, constructive, critical feedback when it's coming from someone. Because in the sports world, I mean, in the business world, people have to sugarcoat things, right? Especially in the world that we're in today. You can't say things too harshly to anybody because people are extremely sensitive. And generally, I just call that weak. But in sports, you get feedback direct. Again, you mess up in the middle of a game, your coach or your teammate will yell at you right in your face for messing up. And if you fall to pieces in the middle of the game, now you're useless to the team. You have to build up the mental toughness to take that feedback. You go play an away game, you got the fans from the other team yelling at you. Now, I know in tennis they had to be quiet, but in basketball they don't. In basketball they yell at you during the game, right? So you have to take that feedback that you're getting from whoever and not fall apart just because someone's giving you constructive feedback. And the thing is what they said true? And this is what I always say I always say this to athletes, and I say it to professionals these days. When someone offers you a criticism, the first thing you need to ask yourself is not how you feel about it. The first question is it true? Is what they said true, that you did mess up? Did you make a mistake? Or is this not working? If it's true, then you should appreciate it, accept it, say, hey, thank you for that feedback. What can we do to fix it? Right? That's the way that you're supposed to respond to these things. And I believe, this is not really what you asked me, but I'm going to say it anyway. I believe this starts at home. It starts at home. That when you are used to accepting that kind of constructive feedback from whoever raised you, whatever adults around you, your parents, then when you go into school, you'll accept it from the teachers. You go to sports, you'll accept it from your coaches. You get a job, you'll accept it from your bosses. And when you don't have that from your upbringing, then it's much harder to take that feedback from someone because you're not used to accepting it.
Mm-hmm. I love the last one you mentioned, if that's true. Because early on growing up, I've always had that coach authority, but in many ways I have been privileged to have some amazing coaches that just knew so much about the game, and I could fully trust their feedback and guidance. I think this is mainly in my corporate career as I have been building, and especially the higher up you go, weirdly, sometimes it can get very lonely, and the more sometimes I find you got to filter through, is this feedback true? It may sound counterintuitive, but I have found
Right.
the more senior I get in corporations, the more I need to be aware of the space I'm coming from and my own experience and my intentions and the way I say things
Mhm.
versus other leaders, because they may have a different style and they may
Right.
not know me fully, my style. And in business corporations, there's actually many leaders that don't even get to know you enough. You work with them very cross functionally. And so they may
Right.
see you in just very narrow view and window to not have a full context and see you kind of behind the scenes. So the filtering through of what is true and isn't true. And as people say, one of these things I really take or try to practice, I'm not perfect at it, but take feedback seriously, but not personally. I think
That's
feedback
right.
is always just a bit of a snippet of information, but then what you decide to do with it. And sometimes actually disregarding it and doing nothing can be the best thing. And sometimes actually really giving it a deep thought and trying to figure out, there's really something good here. How do I implement it and augment maybe the way I do this or that will allow you to just slightly pivot and achieve sort of the next level of growth?
100%. And I like that, what you said there is take it seriously, but not personally. And that's really what everyone needs to be able to do, be able to emotionally detach from the feedback. So you can read into things and care about things mentally, but not emotionally. I think it's the
Mm-hmm.
same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we can talk about many of these things forever. I do want to go back to your career, and we talked about your upbringing.
Mhm.
You actually haven't been the top player in high school or college, and despite of that, you have been able to create an impressive professional career in basketball, where you played in 8 different countries. And so I'm actually curious, going back to all of that we have built in and sort of this mindset that we discussed, if you could lead us a little bit into that part of your life and how have you been able to achieve that?
Sure. So coming out of college, Division III college, I played, but it didn't set the world on fire, and it was only D3. So you play Division III college sports. For those who don't follow sports, Division I is the like March Madness, the tournament you see on TV. Most pro players come from Division I. Then you have Division II, and then Division III. Most of these players are not even dreaming about becoming pros, let alone do they actually become pros, because they don't have the pedigree to be professional players for the most part. So when I got out of college, nobody was checking for me to play pro basketball. So my first year out of school, actually, I worked a couple of regular jobs. I worked at Foot Locker selling sneakers. I worked at a gym selling gym memberships because I had no opportunities to play pro basketball. So a year removed from graduation, I graduated 2004, by the way. So this is 2005. I went to this event called an exposure camp, which is, you probably are familiar with those, but for those not in the sports world, it's like a job fair for athletes. And you pay to go to this event. It's not free. You pay. And it's your opportunity to showcase that you have the talent and the ability to play at the pro level, because there's a bunch of people who are all either already pros or want to be pros. And we all come here to show our skills and hopefully impress somebody. So the audience is agents, managers, coaches, scouts, talent evaluators from all over the world. They come to these events as a destination event looking for talent because they need players the same way the players need jobs. So I went to one of these events and I played pretty well. It was only 2 days, Saturday and a Sunday. I played pretty well at this event. I got a good scouting report from one of the evaluators there, and I had the footage from the games. And when I got back home, so I'm from Philadelphia. The event was in Orlando. So I had to drive to Orlando, me and a couple teammates, former teammates, rented a car, drove to Orlando. 19-hour drive. Played pretty well there. Drove back, had to be back at work on Monday. And that's when I started cold calling basketball agents because I needed an agent. And usually the way agents work in sports is that the agents are calling the players because the agents are looking for players and they want to represent you because they think they can help you get a contract. And if you get a contract and you get paid, they get paid. But no agent was calling me. So I had to call them. So this is not usually the way that it works. So anybody listening to this who don't know the sports world, this is abnormal, the way things went for me. So I was calling agents and telling them, hey, here's who I am. Now I had some proof. I had the scouting report and I had that footage. So I called about 60 agents, Clara, And of the 60 who I called, I was able to get in touch with 20. The 20 who I spoke to, they said, okay, let me see your footage. Now, this footage was on this thing called a VHS tape. You remember those?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so the VHS tape is what I had to send them. So I was making copies of the tape because you didn't have a link. There's no link. You had to physically mail them a tape. I sent this tape out to 20 agents. Of the 20 who I sent it to, one of them I was able to reconnect with, and he said, okay, I will represent you. Because basically the reason I was sending the proof of the scouting report and the tape was to show these agents that, yes, even though I came out of a Division III college, I am a pro level player and I need to prove it to you. Once I prove it to you, now, hopefully that made them want to represent me, and then they will go and call who they know and they can get me a job playing basketball. That was my mindset. That was the process. So I found one agent who agreed to represent me, and he did actually get me a job. So I got my first job in Lithuania in late summer of 2005. So that's how I got started playing pro basketball.
And I know you went through 8 different countries, if I remember correctly. Slovakia was one of them. Was it Macedonia or Montenegro?
Montenegro.
I don't know which other. Mexico. I wonder if you had a favorite country that you had played in, and I don't know if that country is tied to perhaps the culture or mostly to the team and the results that you create as part of the team. How would you evaluate that?
Favorite country, I would have to say, I could really cheat and give you 3 answers. So I'll give you 3 answers. So number 1, I would say Lithuania is number 1. And these are actually no particular order, but I would say Lithuania because that was the first place I went. So that was the first time that I even left the United States, was to go to Lithuania. So it's like your firstborn child. You're never going to forget that one. So Lithuania, number 1. And also because it was surreal just walking around in Kaunas. And I don't know if you've been to Kaunas, but you're from Europe, so you know not a lot of tall black guys just walking around Kaunas, Lithuania. So everybody knows you're a basketball player. Everyone's looking at you twice, and a lot of people don't speak English. But at that time, a lot of the younger people around my age at that time they'd grown up speaking English, watching TV, American TV. So they would speak to you. You're signing autographs, you're taking pictures with people. They don't even know who you are. They just know you're a basketball player. So they're taking pictures with you. Girls looking at you, want to talk to you, all this stuff. So that is number 1. Number 2 answer I would give is Mexico. And a lot of people are surprised, especially Americans are surprised when I say Mexico, because Mexico is a third world country. So it's nothing like Lithuania, not like any of the places I was in Europe. But Mexico was very fast and free is what I would say about Mexico. There were no rules. You didn't know what was going to happen day to day. It was very wild. Mexico's a very wild experience. I would not want to do that now, but I would do it then. I was only 24 years of age when I went to Mexico, but it was very fun because it was just wide open. Anything goes. That's how Mexico was, pretty much, on the court and off the court. And the third place I would give is Herceg-Novi, Montenegro. And those who are not familiar with Herceg-Novi is basically like, I don't know what town I would compare it to in America. It's like Miami, but in Europe, and not as warm, no tropical climate, but it's right there on the water, right on the Bay of Kotor. And it doesn't get that cold in the winter. Maybe 50 degrees is the coldest that you get. It's a tourist destination in Europe, at least in that area. People know that place is a place to go for vacation. And my team was right there in that city. So I could look out my window from my apartment over there. They call it a flat. Out of my flat, I could see the water. And it was beautiful. And Montenegro was a place where that was the first time I had negotiated my own contract. I negotiated that whole deal by myself because my agent no longer had that agent. And I reached out to the team myself. They responded. I negotiated the whole contract, did everything. And on that team, we practiced more on that team than I did any other team I was ever on, just to practice. We practiced twice a day, every day, Monday through Friday. And the games were only on the weekends. So it was just so much practice. My jump shot was automatic when I was playing in Montenegro. I could have made 3-pointers with my eyes closed because we practiced so much. Like, that's all you did. So I was probably as far as my shooting, that was my best time was there in Montenegro because of the amount of practice that we did there. And it actually bled into the rest of my career, and something that I would even tell my audience, like that I developed that 10-to-1 ratio, 10 practices for every 1 game. From my time playing in Montenegro. So those are the top 3 places: Kaunas, Mexico, Herceg-Novi.
Anything you want to call out when it comes to your basketball career? Any games that really stood out or experience that you like to reflect on? This is some of the best games and plays or teams that I have had.
Yeah, I can give you 3 games in particular while you're talking about that. So number one was, I remember I was in Mexico. So Mexico's basketball is different than European basketball. In Mexico, the whole thing is about scoring points, getting stats, just basically like the playground, but professionally. So I had a friend, an American. He's the one who kind of introduced me to the job. He introduced me to somebody who knew somebody. He got me the job playing in Mexico. And I remember he sent me a text message because I told him my first game was coming up. He said, "Don't pass the ball to anybody. Shoot it every time." That's what he told me. He said, "Don't pass anything. Shoot every time." Because he explained to me, like, the whole deal there, they judge you by how many points you have. They judge you by your stats. So if you score 30 points, you're a superstar. And if you score 10 points, you're a bum. That's how it is. Even if your team wins and you score 10 points, you're not good because you only had 10 points. So he says, score as much as you can. That's how they judge you. You want to make more money in Mexico, you got to score more points. So I did exactly what he said. I just shot the ball every single time. I scored about, the most I ever scored in a professional game was I scored 40 points in Mexico. And it's because I shot the ball every time. I didn't pass the ball. So I just shot it every time. And after that game, people were looking at me like I was Michael Jordan because I scored all these points. And that's how he was right. So everything he told me was true. So that was number one in Mexico. So number two was in Montenegro. And on this particular team, European basketball is way different than Mexico. Mexico, you're an American. You play the whole game. You shoot as much as you want. Nobody cares. In Europe, you could be the best player on the team, and you don't even start. You're not even in the starting lineup. And you might not even play half the game. And you're clearly the best player on the team because you're not playing. And you're sitting on the bench, and you're like, why am I not playing? I'm better than everybody on the team. And that's how it was in Montenegro. I remember we played a road game. I didn't start. When I finally got in the game, in the middle of the second quarter, we were already down by like 25 points. And I'm like, why am I not playing? And this is how it is in Europe. Like, you'll see players who will be in America. They'll play Division I, make the all conference. They'll be conference player of the year, Division I in America, go to Europe, and they don't even start for the team they play for in Europe. That's how it is. So the game is 40 minutes long.
Sorry.
What did you say?
Interrupt. Why did they do it that way? It seems so not logical.
Yeah, that's how it is. If I could explain it, then I don't know. Maybe I would have been playing more. But this still happens to this day because I'll see players all conference in America. They'll play in Europe, and they're not starting, and the game is 40 minutes. They might only play 19 out of the 40 minutes of the whole game. And they're clearly the most talented player on the team, but that's how it is. They just have a different style. In Europe, and I can't answer the question. In Europe, the game is not about the individual. See, in America, all Americas, South America, Central America, the game is about the individual. How many points do you have? Who's the superstar? Who's the best player? That's what our culture is when it comes to basketball, is proving that you're the best guy. In Europe, the game is about the team. It's about the team, is about the town, is about the country you represent. If you're representing the country, is not about the individual, ever about the individual. Even if you're a really good player, you must fit into the team structure, no matter how good you are. And this is why in Europe, you never see somebody averaging 35 points a game in Europe. It doesn't happen because you don't play enough to score 35 points, and you won't shoot the ball enough to score 35 points. It's impossible. And if you try to play like that over there, they'll send you home. You won't play. Whereas in Mexico, they want you to score 100 points, shoot every time, to score as much as you can. And in the NBA as well, you see this. So over there is all about the team, is all about the town that you're representing, is all about the pride of the town, not the person. So in this team, we're down by 25 points. I'm getting in the game in the second quarter. And I remember this particular game, I didn't miss any shots. Every time I got the ball, pretty much I shot it, but it wasn't in a selfish way. It wasn't the same way that I did in Mexico. I didn't get as many shots, but every time I did shoot, I made it. And we still lost the game. We still lost by about 20 points. But I had a great game. And after the game, all my teammates are coming up to me, shaking my hand and everything. Even the management came up to me and said, "Man, you had a great game." And man, if I had gotten in the game earlier, maybe we probably would have won the damn game. But I played a great game there. That was my best game playing in Montenegro. And it was important because up to that point, I hadn't been starting any of the games. I never started a single game the whole time I was in Montenegro, not one, even though I was the most talented player on the team. And we were not always winning because the coach wasn't putting me in the game. But that game, I had a great game, and everybody could see, okay, when this guy plays and he's playing more, we'll probably do better. But the coach did what he did. And again, that is universal in Europe. That happens all the time. So the third one was I was in Germany. I was on this team. Actually, I wasn't even on a team yet, technically. I was messing with an agent because I had gone there. I was on one team, then that team basically couldn't keep me. So I was in Germany looking for a team. I connected with an agent. Now, this guy had gone to school in America, but he was a German guy. And he said, I'll take you around to some teams and I'll help you find a team. And the reason he wanted to do this, Clara, is because, again, if he could help me get a contract, then he would make money. So he saw me as someone who had potential to make money, or I'll help you out. So he brings me to this local team. He says, all right, play with this local team in a couple of games. And I remember playing in a game once, and I sat with him at dinner after the game, and he said, well, Dre, you didn't do that good. You weren't very impressive. And I was like, what are you talking about? I thought I did a good job. And he was like, well, over here, we measure Americans by you got to score. You got to be a person who scores. You got to score easily. You got to get points. He was basically sounded a little bit like Mexico. Not exactly, but a little bit closer. It was a similar thing. Like, you got to score points. You got to make it look easy. You got to dunk on guys. You got to do all these things. Like, American players, you all are held to a higher standard. You can't just play good basketball. You got to look like Kobe Bryant out there. You got to look like LeBron. And I'm like, that doesn't even make any sense, because I was doing all the right things, but he was saying it wasn't that good. I said, okay. All right. So we had another game the next day. I said, okay, so he wants me to score points. Okay, I'm going to just shoot the ball every time. So I just took my same mindset from Mexico, and I just shot the ball every time. And I scored a whole bunch of points. We won the game. And after the game, he was like, yeah, that's how you got to play. Just keep doing that. And that was one of my favorite games, just because of the circumstance. And that game also, I'll tell you one last thing. When I was playing in that game, there was an American guy. He was a player. He wasn't on the team we were playing against, but he was part of their system, because in Germany, you may have a team that has 3 or 4 levels of teams. So he was on one of the other teams, but he came to the game to support his guys, and we're playing against his guys. So he's in the crowd talking trash to me from the sideline. He's in the bleachers talking trash to me, because we're the only Americans in the gym. So he's talking to me, and I'm talking back to him during the game. And we ended up winning. So he shut up by the end of the game. After the game, he came over and shook my hand and said, good game. So those are my top 3 games.
What is interesting, really stood out to me, is how you actually had to adjust to the different cultures within the teams and countries. And I never would have thought that there's actually a different way to play basketball, or a strategy to play as a part of a team as a result of, it seems like, the culture that the league and the country has created. Right. And so that is interesting. It seems like in Mexico, you found out through a friend who guided you. But some of the other times, it seems it was just really finding through your own experiences that you then kind of had to level set, or other people who guided you. This is what you have to do to be successful within the team and the league. Is that accurate? Right. Anything else you would want to call out that really helped you adjust faster? I'm guessing based on kind of one experience, you're like, oh, maybe I need to be more mindful about how people navigate this specific team in this specific country.
I remember the first place I played, Lithuania, I didn't really know anything about European basketball. And it's not like, again, this is 2005. So it's not like you can go on the internet and somebody's written a book about it. It's, you just show up and you just figure it out along the way. So I remember my first practice, we were just doing a drill, and you had to catch the ball, go to the basket and make a layup. And I went and I dunked the ball, and all the players were like, whoa, I guess they had never seen anybody do that. So it was like surprising to them to see someone do that, but I knew I needed to do that to impress. I knew I needed to impress from the very first day, because the way it is in Europe in basketball, especially as an American player, is that your job is on the line every day. So if you don't look impressive in practice, you may have just gotten there 2 days ago, but if you don't look impressive in practice, they might say, we don't like this guy. He's not that good. And they'll get rid of you. And they'll send you right back. You just left 2 days ago. You're right back home. And it happens like that. I've seen it happen to players. So I knew I had to come in and impress. And there would be coaches asking me to do things that I had never done before, but they expect you to be able to do it because you're an American. So they look at Americans like you're Superman. When you're playing in these places, they expect you to do it. And if you can't do it, they will find someone who will do it. That's really pretty much how it goes. So you have to make your adjustments on the fly. And for me, it was always just, all right, let me figure out what it is that they want from me, and let me prove that I can do it. Even if I didn't know I could do it, let me just figure it out and prove that I can, because the alternative is I'm back home and now I'm looking for a job all over again. And the jobs are hard enough to get one, let alone get one, lose it, and have to get another one. So I was always just figuring out, how do I adjust in the moment and do whatever is being asked of me. If this is what they want, this is what I had to do. Because when you're playing basketball professionally, and traveling the world. Again, all these places that I named, I never would have gone to these places had it not been for basketball, had it not been for my ability to go out there and perform. And all my friends back home, because mind you, this is the early days of social media. So I'm writing blog posts and posting pictures on Facebook. And all my college friends are looking at it and they're looking at me like you're living a dream, like you're living a movie because you're traveling the world playing basketball. So I didn't want to lose that. I mean, it was good for me too. It wasn't just a matter of what they were saying. It was what I was saying to myself because I wanted to play basketball. Mind you, my first year out of college, Claire, I was working at Foot Locker. So this was not some guarantee, right? I needed to keep these jobs. So whatever I needed to do to keep the job, I was at least willing to try doing it. It wasn't always successful, but I wanted to try.
Yeah. I love hearing you and describing your career and all of the lessons you have learned traveling around and adjusting to different teams and cultures within the teams to thrive. It seems like you were in a position where you really needed to set the level for the rest of the team, or there was the expectations because you come from the US, a country of basketball. And so you have been put by, in some ways, I want to say default to this leadership position. And if you weren't up to lead, then they would pick somebody else who would.
That's right.
And so there's a lot of pressure that comes with that and the need to level up your game to meet, as you mentioned, those expectations that others put on you and sort of standards. Any tips you want to share of what was the mindset and what helped you step into that mindset to thrive on that pressure? Because sometimes when you have this pressure, there's, I believe, two types of people. One that break underneath and it makes them go like constrained and they play worse, versus other that see it as an opportunity to thrive and then step into those shoes to then play better. And I think that's what the best players do, whether it's Michael Jordan, Kobe. Like when you're in the most important points, you need to find a way how to believe in yourself and score. That's what the best of the best do, and it's in any sport. What's your reflection on that, Dre, or any tips you would want to share, even how you coach people through that?
Yeah, so I remember reading, even though the internet wasn't much of the internet when I first started playing, I remember reading books of, let's say, like Michael Jordan, for example. And he talked about how when he first came to the Chicago Bulls, his whole thing was to impress. He wanted to make sure from the very beginning that everyone realized that they made a good choice in picking this guy as the guy. And I remember hearing stories and people who were on the team at that time, they said, you could tell from the first day that he was the guy. He was going to be the guy because he showed up with the right energy, with the right skills, with the right mindset and all of those things. So when I got my chance to play, I wanted to do the same thing. And I wasn't quite Michael Jordan, but I was looking to do the exact same thing. And when it comes to the people who I work with these days, a lot of them are not athletes. They are people who run their businesses, but they're in leadership positions. One of the things that I always eventually need to tell them is that your energy is going to trickle down to the rest of the team. So however you show up is how everybody else is going to show up, and they're not as good as you. Usually they're not on your level. They might be 80% of what you are. So whatever you want them to be, you need to be that and more. They're never going to be exactly who you are because you're the person. You're the guy, you're the girl. They're going to be about 80% of your level. So you have to show up consistently every day with the right energy. And no one should be able to tell how good or bad you're feeling based on your energy, based on how you show up. Your energy should be consistent every day, regardless of what's happening. And that's what an athlete needs to do as well. Because if you had a terrible last two games, that has nothing to do with this game that we have today. And if your last game went amazing, that has nothing to do with the game that we have tonight. So it's always being able to have and I put this under the umbrella of mental toughness, Clara, being able to clear the mental slate. You got to clean your slate, regardless of what happened in the last match, whether it went terrible or went amazing. That has nothing to do with this match. You have to show up as if the last match did not happen, good or bad, because this one is a brand new game. So that is a discipline. It does require mental toughness, and it's something that's very difficult for a lot of people to do. But through a sporting experience, I learned it very well, and that's how I can help people who have not played sports at a high level. I can help them understand it.
And I guess going back to, I'm always curious how people decide to quit their athletic careers. It's typically something quite hard we have to go through because the sport becomes our identity. And so you literally go through identity crisis, and now you have to move on through all the hard work and effort you have put in and decide who you want to be next. So I'm actually curious, you have had this impressive career that less than 1% in the world achieves, to play basketball professionally. What made you decide to retire? And I want to dive a little bit more into your transition, which is fascinating. I want to build on everything you said about basketball and the skill sets that you have been applying now to creating your online presence, coaching business, speaking business. But yeah, first curious about kind of that journey of deciding to quit basketball and then starting something else over.
Well, the first thing, I never considered myself retired. I don't know. It sounds like an old person. It sounds like my dad or something. But no, I never considered myself retired. I just stopped playing. That's what I like to say.
Okay.
But retired makes it sound like I'm 65 years old. But anyway, when it came to moving away from basketball, we would have to go back in the story. So, and I'll make this quick. I got introduced to network marketing when I was in college. Now, I did not build a career in network marketing, but I did go to a few of the meetings. And in those meetings, I got introduced to two things. Personal development was number one, which I didn't know about before then. I was always into reading books, but I didn't know there was a whole category for this stuff, like books on just making yourself a more valuable person. And number two, I got introduced to the concept of entrepreneurship, because the speakers at those meetings, they were just breaking down your false beliefs about how to make money and how to do business, and inserting new beliefs about, hey, there's alternative ways to generate income in life besides just go and work somewhere, which is what school was preparing me for anyway. So I kept that in the back of my mind, because I read two books that kind of drove home these two concepts. One was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, and the other was Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And as I read both of those books, the Think and Grow Rich told me that there was a way that you could consciously and intentionally change your patterns of thought to alter your behavior, which alters your outcomes in life. And Rich Dad Poor Dad taught me that there's a way to, again, an alternative way of doing business in life outside of just going to work and then you work, you get paid. Now, as an athlete, that was what I was doing. Now, again, as you said, I'm doing something only 1% of people get to do, but it is still a job. Now, when you play basketball, it's a job. You get hired, you get paid. If you're not hired, you're not getting paid. So I always had in the back of my head, after basketball, I want to go into business. And that's because the seed was planted through Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and my network marketing experience. And because I understood, Clara, that basketball does not last forever. Athletic careers are very short. The average basketball career is like 4 or 5 years. I happen to go longer than that, but that's an anomaly. And by the time most basketball players, by the time you're age 40, you're out of basketball. It's over. So you still have another 40, hopefully, years to live, and you need something to do. So I already knew entrepreneurship was the way. So going to the middle of the story here, about 2009, I found myself unemployed. I was a free agent and nobody was calling. I did not have any offers. So this is when I started to focus on how can I take this audience, because at the time I had YouTube videos. I was putting basketball videos on YouTube. So I had all these ball players watching me, just how to dribble, how to practice, how to shoot, how to dunk, just basketball stuff. They had begun to ask me questions about mindset, because they found out 1 year of high school, walked on to play D3 college. You kind of hustled your way into playing pro basketball. Everything that we've been talking about here, they knew about that, because I would respond to the comments, and every once in a while I would make a video just talking about high school or college or my experience. So they wanted to know what was the mindset behind a guy who would keep trying despite these setbacks. And I started talking about the mindset pieces that I had been using myself and how they could apply to basketball. I just started talking about them just on a mindset basis. I wasn't really talking about sports. I was just talking about mindset, period. So I started talking about discipline and confidence and mental toughness and taking initiative. And I called it the weekly motivation. And I did those videos every Monday. And it would just be a little 2 to 5 minute selfie video before selfie videos were a thing. Again, it's like 2009, 2010. And I did that video, Claudia, every Monday for 400 Mondays in a row. And that laid the foundation for where we are today. Because what happened was two things. Number one is I realized that there was an entire framework here that was valuable for people. As I kept explaining it, I started to realize like I got more material on mindset than I thought I had. because the players were asking for it and they were starting to tell me like, Dre, this stuff is really valuable. Like I can use this because you're showing me how to dribble and how to shoot. But when I get in the game, I'm not doing it. They realized that the mindset piece was missing. I have the ability, but I don't have the mentality. So the mentality was the missing piece for them. And the other thing was people who didn't play sports started finding those videos. And they would say to me, Dre, I don't even play basketball, but I still follow you on YouTube because that mindset stuff you're talking about is applicable to me in my situation. So this told me this is going to be my segue from sports to the rest of the world. I don't have to just talk to athletes. I can talk to anyone with this mindset stuff because they're already telling me that they need it and they don't play sports. So I always knew I wanted to step outside of the realm of sports. I knew that after basketball, I did not want to be a coach. I didn't want to be a trainer. I didn't want to be an analyst. I wanted to do something that had nothing to do with basketball. And that's exactly what this offered me the opportunity to do. So that was 2009. Luckily, the phone did eventually ring again. I kept playing and I didn't stop playing until 2015. But by then, I had already, again, laid out the foundation of what became Work on Your Game. This whole framework, I had it in place already. I started writing books. So I had books written. I was already creating courses. Eventually, like very quickly, someone came to me and said, hey, do you offer coaching? I started coaching people. And I had an audience. I had an audience of people. They were already following me on the internet. And my business was going to be online anyway. So all the pieces that someone would want if they were going to run an online business, I already had a lot of that foundation in place while I was still playing. So when it was time for me to stop playing, or when I decided to stop playing, I already had all the pieces in place. So it wasn't a very difficult decision for me. I could have kept playing if I wanted to. I stopped playing. I was 33 years of age. I could have gone a couple more years, but I decided that there was an opportunity for me to capitalize on what I was doing business-wise. And I took that opportunity and ran with it. So that was in 2015. So my decision to stop playing, again, was a lot easier than it is for most players because I knew exactly what I was going to do the very next day. Whereas a lot of players, when they stop playing, they put 100% of themselves into just that thing. And they haven't even thought about the next thing. So now they're starting at zero. I wasn't starting at zero. And again, it's not because I wasn't focused on basketball when I was playing. It's because I was focused and nobody was calling back. Like the phone, nobody was answering the phone. I wasn't getting any calls. So I had to start thinking about what are my alternatives here because this might be over. And what a lot of people don't understand about sports is that you often don't know that your career is over. You're often the last person to find out that there's no more games. At 2009, I was thinking to myself, this might be over. I might not get another call. So let me figure out what I'm going to do next, just in case it's right now. Luckily, I got a few more years, but that's how my transition started way before I was actually done.
What a just beautiful example and beautiful note and like what you had to go through. But it reminds me of sometimes the hard times that makes us realize something new and learn. And it probably must have been such a hard year for you, right? Because that's what you wanted to do in basketball, but it made you face another reality. And I love how you embrace it because in many ways you could have just sit there and continue to practice, but you decided to, again, continue with your grit and resilience and mental toughness that you have built and you beautifully described through your example, even in childhood and your basketball career, actually through that seems like carries over as is the through line to everything, including hustling to create your basketball career. And then obviously using that gap year of never having a contract in basketball as something, what else can I create and how can I be useful here? And then you put in your full effort and consistency into creating your brand and value for people in a different way, which is, I think, just a beautiful example on its own. And what strikes me when I'm looking at your online presence and YouTube video, and obviously the books, 33 books alone to write, is just the amount of volume that you're able to produce. And so in my view, just going through and listening to your story, it seems like you're applying the same principles of what made you successful in basketball. And it's like the not giving up, getting out there, practicing. And you only can improve by practicing and getting better, because I find it as well in my podcast, right? If you listen to your first podcast, it's probably very crappy versus like the 25th becomes better and the 50th. And we'll see when I get to my 100th. but
Right.
there's always something that you learn and improve. So any other things you want to share and leave for listeners, anybody who wants to start either their influencer presence or any other business that they're creating, what have you found are the things that work the best when it comes to some of these growth principles that you have uncovered again from basketball and applying to growing your entrepreneurship business now?
Wow. Well, we could have a whole nother conversation just on that alone. But
Sorry, I know, big question,
yeah,
but yeah.
to answer your question, I'll just tell you the 4 pieces of what we do now. Our framework is based around mindset, strategy, systems, and accountability. So I'll go briefly over each one. So mindset is the foundation. I've always believed is the foundation of all success, is the foundation of all failure, and everything in between, because the process for achieving anything in life is being, then doing, then having. So be, do, and have. So if you want to change your outcomes in life, most people think about their outcomes, their goals, which is a good thing to think about. You should think about what you want, because if you don't have a target, you can't score. All right. You don't have a goal, you can't score. And usually people understand that you can't get something for nothing. So we had to do some kind of work in order to get to our goals. That is a good idea too. I mean, I'm the work on your game guy. I'm not going to tell you not to do work. Now, the challenge is most people only think about those 2 things. They never ask themselves the question, who do I need to be as a person, or how might I need to change as a person so that when I do these things, I can get the result that I want. And most people are the same person by the time they hit puberty and through the rest of their lives. They never change personally, even though they do a whole lot of different things. And then they wonder why the things they're doing are not producing the desired result. It's because you haven't changed your being. You have to change who you are as a person. And by change, what I mean is you have to change your energy, your aura, your mindset, your thought processes. You have to eliminate the ideas of what you can't do, those limiting false beliefs. You have to eliminate the ideas of what is impossible, what you could not possibly get done today. Maybe eliminate some ideas of things that you think are true, but actually are not true. You got to get all that junk out of there. You got to get all that junk out of your mind so that your mind is clear enough to insert new ideas, new beliefs. And when you change your beliefs, and then you can do even the same actions that you did before with a different set of beliefs and a different energy, it produces a different outcome. And this is the key right here. When people really understand this, this is when things start to change. You can do the same things today that you were doing last week with a different energy and a different understanding. They produce a different result because energy matters. Energy is 85% of the game in life. So energy starts with the way you think, not with what you do. So when we change the thinking, that's the mindset. Then we can do the stuff and get the outcome. So that's the mindset piece. The second piece is the strategy. Strategy is just a plan of action. What are we going to do? Who, what, when, where, why, how? What exactly is going to happen here? And a lot of people who I work with, they want help with strategy for their business. I want to get to this outcome, but I don't know exactly how to do it. So what we do here is what we call the roadmap in reverse, where we basically deconstruct from where you want to go to where we are right now. And then we map out a plan for how to do that. The third piece is the system. The system is just how do we execute on the strategy over and over and over again so you can get a consistent result. So you think of a company like Starbucks, anyone that you go to, if you go to the Starbucks, and I believe you're in Texas. You're in Texas?
Yes, Austin.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you go to Starbucks in Texas, and I don't even drink coffee, but if I go to the Starbucks in Miami, then the coffee comes out exactly the same. And it's not because they're calling each other on the phone and saying, how'd you make yours? How'd I make mine? It's because they have a system. The system is if someone orders this drink, this is how you do it. And it's exactly the same everywhere you go. And many big businesses, national companies, that's exactly how it is. You get the same experience no matter which one you go to because they have a systematized process. So this is what I help people do. This could just be one person. You don't have to have a national company. You can have a system for yourself. So I would guess, Clyde, when you were playing tennis, you had a system for how you warmed up before your workouts. Right? You had a system for how you cooled down. You had a system for stretching. You had a system for foam rolling. You had a system for working on your serve. You had a system for working on your backhand. Like whatever you did in tennis, there was a system for it. You did the same things the same way every time. That's what a system is. And the fourth part is accountability. That is just making sure that everything is doing its job, because just because you have a strategy doesn't mean it's going to work. Right? You have a strategy, it doesn't work. I got this plan. This is what I'm going to do to jump higher, but you're not jumping higher. Okay, we got to change the strategy. That's not working. Or this is the system that we're going to use to achieve this outcome, but the system's not working. So we got to change the system. So accountability is about making sure the pieces work. And of course, it's about making sure the people work. So a lot of times as a coach, I'll get people coming to me saying, Dre, I already know all the things I need to do. I just need someone to hold me accountable. right?
Mhm.
So that's the accountability piece, is for the people and the pieces. Make sure everything is working the right way. So those are our 4 pieces: mindset, strategy, systems, accountability. They apply in sports, same way they apply in business.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Dre, I think we could go forever, but I want to give you one more opportunity, open mic. Anything else you want to share? Really love the perspective and how you have taken everything you have learned through your basketball journey. That hasn't been easy at all, but I think because of that and the fact that it hasn't been easy for you, I'm actually even curious how much it actually helped you understand these principles. Because as I talk to guests, it seems like, especially the things that don't come naturally to us, we often become better in explaining them. So I wonder if
Mhm.
that's also true for you, because you had to learn all of these steps by yourself. You're actually
Mhm.
now better in helping others understand them. And obviously, anything else you want to mention, then I have a couple quick, short questions for you for closing.
Sure. And I would agree with what you said, your assessment there, your insight there, in that it allows someone to become an expert when they have kind of experienced the full scale of something.
Mm.
So it's hard to be an expert at, let's say, confidence if you've always been very confident, because you don't know what it feels like to not have any. So how are you going to help someone who doesn't have any? You don't know what it feels like to be them. So, and this is another reason why you see a lot of the best athletes, like the people who are the superstars and the Hall of Famers, a lot of times they are not very good coaches or trainers, because they don't know what it feels like to be the guy at the end of the bench, because they can't relate to them. And a lot of the best coaches, at least in basketball, see this. And I don't know if it happens in tennis, but I would bet it does. That a lot of the best coaches you see in basketball who used to be players, they were okay players. They weren't like the legends. They were okay, because they know what it feels like to be the guy at the end, the guy at the middle. Maybe you're a starter for a little while, but they can relate to pretty much everybody because they've been in every position. So absolutely, when it comes to the mindset stuff that I talk about, I have been the person who was, again, counted out, or I wasn't even counted, period. Not even counted out. In, out, I wasn't counted at all. So I had to develop the discipline to work on my game on my own. Like, I built up my own confidence because nobody was telling me I was going to be somebody. I had to be mentally tough enough to keep dealing with the setbacks, and I had to have the initiative to even try in the first place. Because, again, it's not like I had the whole neighborhood behind me saying, you're going to be the best basketball player out there, so go do it. I had to do that on my own initiative. It was a personal choice. It wasn't like somebody was pushing me to do it. So absolutely, when it comes to that. And I forget the other piece of your question there.
Anything else you want to leave with people when it comes to what they should know about what you do and your business? I actually have like side questions. I even left Dre all day. How did you came up with these slogans? It reminds me just a really fun sort of catchy sort of phrase. So anything else you want to share that you want people to know about what you do?
Yeah. So everybody has a game, whether you're playing a sport, any sport, whether you're running a business, whether you're in a career, whether you are a student, a teacher, a parent, or you're just trying to figure it out. Because there's some people listening to this who are just trying to figure it out. What am I? Who am I? And what am I? And what am I going to do? Is that we all have a game. So first thing you must do is figure out what game you're in. And I find people who I work with, a lot of times I find people think they're in one game, but they're actually in another game. So you need to know what game you're actually in. That's number one. Once you understand that, then you go develop your ability to play that game. Then when you get your opportunity, you have to perform, because we're in a performance-based business. When you perform, you must produce results, because this is a results-based business. And if you produce results, you get whatever rewards you wish. And you can name your rewards when you're producing results consistently. So that is what Work on Your Game is all about. Our focus is Work on Your Game University. That's the place where you can find out what we're doing and see about us. Again, that's just Work on Your Game University.com, workonyourgameuniversity.com. And as far as Dre All Day, to answer your other question, I came up with that because I knew probably around 2002, I saw where the internet was going, and it was, oh, you can have your own website with your own name, call it whatever you want. I said, all right, I want to have a website that's by me and about me. So DreBaldwin.com doesn't really ring off. It's not really memorable. So I said, I need something better than that. I do own DreBaldwin.com, but I needed something better, something that was more ringy, more catchy. So I remember reading this book called Pop, P-O-P, and it's by this author named Sam Horn. And in the book, P-O-P stands for pithy, original, and purposeful. And the whole book is about coming up with phrases and titles for your stuff. It could be a course, a book, a website, a business, whatever, that is pithy, original, and purposeful. And one of the things that she talked about was trying to find something that's alliterative, so where the sounds rhyme, and short enough that people can remember it. So it has to be simple enough that people can remember it without writing it down. So I was just trying to figure out, how can I do that? How can I make that work? Baldwin, nothing rhymes with Baldwin. So I didn't know how to do that. So then I was thinking Dre, all right, a lot of stuff rhyme with Dre, that sound, that A sound. So how can I do that, Dre? And I just kept playing around with it. And I just followed, she has some exercises in the book, and I just kept messing around with it in my mind, trying to figure out what to come up with. And then I just came up with Dre all day. So that's where it came from. I just made it up. Dre all day. It was perfect. When you hear it, you know exactly, you get it. You remember it, you don't forget it, and it worked. And I went and got the domain name dreallday.com. So that's where it started.
Nice. Love it. I'll try to go find the book, because I think coming up with these slogans is sometimes the hardest thing. So yes. Kudos on that. Last two questions. There's lots happening in this world, obviously, ongoing wars, economy. Anything you want to leave people with in 2024, what would you want to invite them to be doing more of or less of?
Collapsing your time frames. That's the most important thing you can do. And that's the biggest focus that I have for myself right now in life is collapsing time frames. And what that means is, instead of getting something done over the course of a month, let's see if we can get it done in a week. Instead of it taking 3 days, let's see if we can get it done in 3 hours. That's what collapsing time frames means. And the biggest impediment to someone collapsing a time frame is not, can you just move faster and run faster and sleep less and drink more coffee? That's not, yes, that can be part of it. If that's what you want to do, you can try it. But the biggest part about collapsing time frames is our limiting beliefs about what we cannot do, what's not possible, and what is not logical. That's the biggest reason why many of us take as long as we take to get things done, because we think that's how long it's supposed to take. But if we remove those thoughts from our brains and say, okay, well, instead of just taking 10 days, let's see if we can get it done in 10 hours. You probably could, as long as you don't have the belief that you can't. The biggest thing for a lot of people is what they think is true, but it's actually not true. And if we can remove that, then the world opens up to you. So that's the biggest thing that I'm focused on right now. So anybody wants to know, that's it. Besides working in the game university, but for me personally, biggest thing I'm focused on is how do I collapse time frames? And instead of it taking this long, let's make it take this long.
Love it. It's a good challenge even for me personally. I'll see how I can perhaps add some of that specifically maybe to my podcast production. So thank you for that. I know you have a bunch of resources. I will add your website, your YouTube channel, Instagram to the episode notes. But is there a best way for anybody who's listening, want to reach out, get in touch with you? Do you have a preferred platform?
Best way would be, of course, through any social platform. My number one social platform is probably Instagram. I use that the most actively. It's just my name, @Dre Baldwin. I do offer people a free copy of one of my books. Can I share that?
Yes, please. Yeah, that would be great.
So are we on video?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so this is my book, The Third Day, The Decision That Separates the Pros from the Amateurs. You asked me about this earlier. So I wrote a whole book about it. It's all about how you show up and give your best effort when you least feel like it. So the book is free. We'll send you a paperback copy of this book to your physical mailbox. All you have to do is cover the shipping. Just go to thirddaybook.com, thirddaybook.com. Show up, give your best effort when you least feel like it. This is what all the pros do. All the high-level people do this. So thirddaybook.com.
Excellent. I'll ensure to add the link as well so people can easily click and find it. And Thank you so much, Dre. It's been a pleasure. I think the two of us could talk for hours and still have fun things to say. So if you have a trip to Austin, please let me know. Happy to take you on the tennis court. I'm an awful basketball player, but if you want to give me any tips, I'll take them. We can trade lessons from our sports on the actual courts. So that would be fun too.
Excellent. I need to get on I need to get out to Austin. I haven't been there since it's turned around. So I'll take you up on it.
Excellent. I look forward to it.